Improve your coloring with the use of a photo reference, and today I'm going to show you how you can fix your mistakes. Hi, I'm Amber Rain Davis from NotableInk.com. Welcome back to the channel. Let's jump right in. I've chosen a group of blue-green and yellow-green Copic markers. You can see that I have the BG 90, 93, 96, 99. If I were to stick to just those colors, I feel like it would be really boring because you don't have any variance between the cool and the warm colors. So I'm going to pull in those yellow greens to add more interest to these leaves. And obviously you can see my photo reference over there is more of a yellow-green leaf, but I tend towards the blue-greens, so I'm going to do a mix, and you're going to see that that's going to bring a lot more depth. So I started off with the BG90, and I just kind of penciled out, if you will, my shadows, where my shadows are going to be. And I'm using my photo reference to know where I need to put those darker lines, looking at the creases of those leaves there. And then I came in with the darkest BG, the BG99. And now you can see I'm blending that out with the BG96, and I'm going to move my way back down with the markers. This is the BG93. And I'm just going to keep blending these. I'm going to start off with all the BGs, and then you're going to see me bring in the yellow greens. And while I continue to color, let me tell you a little bit about this stamp set. This stamp set is called Photo Florals, and this is the digital version. I also sell a 6x8 clear stamp set of this bouquet on my website at NotableInk.com. And with the clear stamp set and also with the digital stamp set, you get a photo reference. Here you can see I'm adding that yellow green, and you can see that that different tone just makes this leaf so much more interesting, right? So I have my photo reference over here, and this is the actual photo that I used when I hand drew this bouquet here. You can see that they're not exactly the same. I didn't want to draw it exactly the same. It's not traced. I drew it with pencil and paper and then digitized it in Adobe Illustrator, but it's enough the same. The structure is enough the same and close enough to where you can get really accurate highlight and shadow and color information from your photo reference. And that's going to help you tremendously when you're trying to improve your coloring skills. So you can see I'm referring back to the photo reference. I'm deepening up the shadows in these creases, and I'm going to blend these again. Now I've printed this on a premium copy paper. It's not a cardstock, it's a thinner piece of paper. And I am coloring on a glass mat, which is what I prefer to do with my Copic markers, but definitely use whatever paper you prefer. I tend to print on a premium copy paper because it goes through my printer really easily and it doesn't get any of that curling that can sometimes happen with cardstock. I have printed this digital stamp on top of one of my buff titanium gel printables. Those are also available on my website. Generally, if I'm going to Copic color, I prefer to use digital stamps because then I can color right away. And I can also drop in these digital backgrounds so that I don't have to worry about trying to color a background. Take a look at all the depth in this leaf. It looks great with the variance of the cool and the warm. We've got super deep shadows. You want to make sure that you don't blend out all of those shadows. You've got to leave some of that dark color there. And I know the dark colors can be scary, but you really need that full array of color value in order to really bring the highlights and the shadows to life. Here I just wanted to use just a much lighter green on the stem to show that the washi tape was sitting on top of that. Here I'm going to zoom in on my photo reference on my phone and take a look at the shadows on this white flower here. First off, I'm going to do the buds, and for these, I want these to look different than the other leaves, so I'm only going to use the blue-green markers on this so that they look a little bit different and they don't look the same as the rest of the leaves. So this is the first stamp set in my Photo Florals series, and that's what the stamp set is named. I will have more in this series, and the whole idea behind it, of course, is to have the photo reference so that you can improve your coloring and you have something to go by to help you out when you're coloring. Because I found my most successful cards that I colored were the ones that I used a photo reference with. So the whole idea behind my YouTube tutorials and my website and the products that I'm coming out with are my whole philosophy is that everyone is an artist. Just like everybody can learn to speak a language, everyone can learn to create art. Is everyone going to end up being fluent in every single language? No. Is everyone going to end up being a Pablo Picasso? Or no, not everybody is going to be a master of the skill, but everyone is an artist, and you just have to learn and apply the techniques that you learn. So what I would like to do with my company is provide tools and tutorials to empower you to create and to create confidently. And that's what I'm all about here on my channel. If you're new to my channel, that gives you an idea of what this channel is about and what you can expect. Here I'm just adding some shadows to the washi tape stamp here, and I'm doing that with the warm grays. I believe I'm using W00, W1, W3, and that's it. I'm keeping it really light and just fading it out into that gel printable background. Now, when I set up this washi tape on top of the flower stamp, because those are two separate digital stamps, I decreased the opacity of the white fill layer on the washi tape so that it would look like it was a little transparent, like washi tape is over the stem of the flowers. I'm zooming in on the photo reference on my phone to really get a good look at that white flower, and you can see that here too. The shadow that the top petal cast on that petal that's below is huge. It's more than half of that petal is in shadow. If I didn't have a photo reference, I would never color the shadow like that. I would never be that aggressive or that bold with my shadow. It just wouldn't even occur to me to do that. I would probably just do a little line under the lip of where the petal curls up and a little bit at the base, and that's it. So again, that's where the photo reference can really come in handy to teach you more about shadows. The thing about it though is that you have to be observant, right? You have to look at the photo and really take note of the variance in color, the variance in hue, the variance in shade, and observe what you're looking at and put that into practice. So I'm not saying that the photo reference is going to magically turn you into a master colorist. There's still work to be done, right? You still have to take that information, process it, and then apply it to your project, but it should help and make it easier for you. I'm sticking with the warm grays for this flower, and I'm keeping a lot of it just plain white, and I'm going to do some shadows behind the flower to pop those white areas forward to enhance the look of that highlight. But you want to be careful about not adding too much shadow. Otherwise, your flower starts to not look white anymore and starts to just look gray. So you need to maintain some of those bright white highlights so that it still looks like a white flower. If you guys are enjoying this video, please take a moment and give it a like and subscribe down below. Leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts. This really helps me out. It helps for YouTube to push the video out so more people can see it and more people can learn. Here you can see the color seeped outside of the line a little bit. So I've put the card front on top of a microfiber cloth. I'm going to use my colorless blender, and I'm just working the marker over that spot and kind of pushing that spot down into the microfiber cloth. And I'm going to press that down and kind of try to absorb that ink. The colorless blender is not an eraser. It's not going to take that ink away, but you can push the ink through the paper into whatever absorbent surface you have underneath it. Now, a bit of a warning, if you are coloring on a glass mat or a non-porous surface and you try to do this, it's just going to, all of that colorless blender is going to pool and it's going to come back up through the surface, and your spot is probably going to get worse. So do make sure you have something absorbent underneath your paper when you do that, but you can see the spot is completely gone. Moving on to the rose, I'm using the R12 and the E01, 21, 51, 93, and 95. So I'm using really light colors here. You can see that the rose in the photo has a lot of highlight on it. There are some deep shadows, but it's mostly in highlight, especially on that front part of the largest petal in the front. And so I've picked out a lot of really light colors. You can see I've swatched them out on a piece of paper there just to get an idea of which ones I wanted to use. And I'll use a mix of these and build up the colors. Now you can see that the flower starts to go a little gray. That's because these markers are so light, there's more there's kind of more of the colorless blender in there than there is pigment. And as that starts to pool between the paper and the glass mat, you see it kind of pool up a little bit, and the flower will look a little gray until it evaporates. So you can see that petal right there is a little gray. It'll evaporate and the highlights will start to look white again. So I know I talked about I prefer using digital stamps if I'm going to Copic color. If I'm going to watercolor, I prefer using clear stamps because then I can do some no-line watercoloring pretty easily. I can also emboss the image, and it's a little easier to watercolor, right? Because it creates those little wells. So the clear stamps are great for that. So clear and digital stamps both have a place in my craft room, but I know this is a very, very polarizing subject for most people. Most people are either like all the way clear stamp or all the way digital stamp, and they don't, I guess, necessarily use them equally. The printer that I use is a color laser printer. I think that those are awesome. You don't have to wait for the ink to dry like you do with inkjet. If you have an inkjet printer and you're printing this, you can totally still do your watercolor and your Copic coloring with it. You just need to test it first before Copic coloring. And if it's taking too long to dry, then maybe consider heat drying it before you start coloring, and then that should help. So moving on to, I don't even know what you would call this flower here. I have no idea. Is it like it's almost like a mum, like before it opens. I don't know. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm using R22 for the tips. And then as I move down to the bottom of the flower, I'm putting the R22 in the base because I want the tips to be darker, and then I want lighter color to come up to the tips. So I'm using those same colors that I used on the rose. This is E95, and I'll use even a lighter color, the E01, to do a little bit more of the filling in, and that just gives you that nice two-tone effect. Now, this flower definitely needs more shadows. Here you can see a close-up of it. It looks good, but it needs a little more depth. There's not a lot of delineation between the flowers. I didn't want to add more color, so I grabbed the W1, and I'm going to use a light gray to add some little bit of drop shadows or casted shadows that the overlapping petals would cause. It's not too much, it's just enough, but it gives you that depth that I was looking for. So keep that in mind when you need to add a shadow. If you want a subtle shadow, maybe a light warm gray is the way to go. For live things, if you're doing an inanimate object, maybe the cool grays would be a better choice for like metallics and things like that. But you don't always have to use the darkest color for your shadows, I guess is what I'm getting at. You can also use a really light green or a very light purple, depending on what your photo reference looks like, right? Because shadows aren't always gray. Sometimes they are colors, and sometimes they're a completely opposite color of the object that you're painting or coloring. So really take a look at your photo reference and look at the color of the shadows. It's probably not black, it's probably not gray. There might be a mix of colors in there. And that'll give you a more realistic approach to your shadows. So this is looking really good. I'm loving these colors. I do think the blue-green buds that I have there kind of stick out like a sore thumb a little bit. Like they don't really look all that natural, right? Because they're blue-green. They don't have that warmth and life to them. So I probably will add a little yellow-green in there at the end of this. But what I'll do now is let's add a drop shadow. Now, this shadow isn't in the photo reference, but you know, I have these florals either, I don't know, we can kind of imagine that they're laying down on a table, or I don't even know how these would be positioned. It's kind of like an imaginary scene here, right? But I do want a shadow here because I think it just helps to bring the flower forward and away from the gel printable background. So I'm just going to add a light shadow in here. And I started off with the W1 and I'm blending that out into the gel printable with the W00 marker. And you can see just that little bit of a cast shadow makes a difference to pop that floral forward. Here I have the W5 and I'm going in a little bit stronger in these kind of darker, more recessed areas. And again, I'll blend that out with the W00. I'll probably even go in with the W1 or the W3 to add a little more shadow in there. I love to see and share what you're making. So if you decide to purchase this stamp set and you post on social media, be sure to tag your images, not just in the comments, but definitely tag your images, because we get better notified that way when you let us know by tagging the photo. Tag it at Notable Ink and hashtag Notable Ink in your comments so that I can see and share your makes. Here's the finished card, and I used really soft colors, but in the release blog hop that we had, Joe Herbert and Colleen Balija and Terry Wilson did a wonderful job with some really bright, vibrant colors. So if you haven't joined us on the hop, I'll put a link to that in the description down below. Be sure to check that out. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you real soon with more inspiration.